Hey guys, it's Christopher Tom here. Now H3H3 Productions is one of the most recognized YouTubers on the platform. Although H3 has earned a generally solid reputation, recently they found themselves embroiled in controversies which have caused many people to question their integrity. After 3 months of not posting to the main channel, they came back with an ad for a freemium game that had microtransactions. The whole loot box issue was a bit of a gray area because some saw this as hypocritical since Ethan was critical of something similar in the past. But in my opinion, this wasn't really an issue because what Ethan was critical of in the past was loot box gambling, and you know what you're getting if you want to buy something in H3 Ball Rider. In fact, I'd say there are bigger and more general issues with H3H3 Productions at the moment. This video is not coming from a source of hate, just criticism. In fact, they used to be one of my favorite YouTubers. For a long time it was H3H3 Productions. They're a very important part of why I do this stuff in the first place. But they've really slowed down lately, and I think their main focus is on the podcast. So I like their videos, but with all that being said, it's still necessary to think critically. A lot of people have this idea that their favorite YouTubers can do no wrong, and they're quick to dismiss any criticism of them. But there are a lot of problems with this content, and because the podcast comprises so much of that content these days, that's what I'm going to look at today.
I would think that I would be smelling my period blood.
One of the most criticized episodes of the H3 podcast is the one with Bill Burr. There were lots of uncomfortable moments, some of which could even be considered cringeworthy.
It seems like you're in love with your daughter.
At first I thought Bill was just being kind of a difficult guest, but the more I looked at it, the more I realized that there was a lot of stuff that Ethan could have done better. And although there was a general consensus that something was off about their podcast with Bill Burr, there are many different reasons people give that try to explain why this interview wasn't very good. I think one of the main reasons is because Ethan tends to treat these podcasts more like Q&As rather than a free-flowing conversation. In some of the podcasts he does, you can see the notes and questions he wrote in a Google Doc.
So we just got a good look at the Google Doc he uses to question this guy. And wouldn't you know it, it outlines every single question he asks.
For me, and I got a big outfit. And
So you're a successful dentist. What is your passion? Is it comedy or dentistry?
Well, I wasn't doing this for money. I'm not making money doing it. It's a
Right.
passion from here.
So what does your wife think about the...
She thinks I'm nuts. And I got my oldest son that thinks I'm nuts, and my young one thinks I'm hysterical.
What does she think about all the female attention you get?
It even has some of the fucking jokes that he uses.
Jimmy emails me very frequently. He pretty much emails me like 5 times a day. We're best friends. He emails Hila too.
Except I ended up blocking him.
There's nothing wrong with taking notes and having certain questions in mind to ask the person. The issue arises from the fact that in many cases it seems like Ethan is trying too hard to adhere to these notes and to the plan that he's created in his head. This can result in some unnatural and forced conversational shifts, and the problem with this method is that it doesn't really account for the spontaneous nature of conversation. You can make notes and try to map out in your head where you'd like the conversation to go, but because conversation is a two-way street, you need to be able to accept that there could be some turns and detours along the way. For instance, taking this approach with someone like Bill Burr isn't really a good idea, and you're likely to get a much more entertaining and smooth podcast if you approach it through the lens of a conversation rather than an interview or a Q&A. Another downside of this approach is that because Ethan is so interested in following his own plan in the way that he mapped out, Ethan sometimes ends up trying too hard to get to the next point, which leads to some of the unnatural and forced conversational shifts that I brought up earlier. And Ethan just has a problem with talking over his guests in general.
Your
Because
life
at some
up,
point you need to work as a team.
Yeah,
You know, like
yeah.
there's a plane crash and maybe we should go this way.
Fuck
those,
that
man.
plan.
I'm going over
Well,
here.
no, it's not-
Who's
it's
this
not- it's not
cocksucker
a-
leading me out of the woods?
But
like
it's not fuck everyone. It's fuck these guys that don't deserve my respect.
He just injects himself into the conversation a bit too much when really he should just let the guest speak. It's really important to let the conversation breathe, and it can't breathe if you're trying too hard to steer it in an unnatural direction. One of the main things that attracted people to H3H3 Productions in the first place was Ethan's spontaneous and improvisational nature. That's part of what made Ethan so entertaining to watch. He just needs to transmute that same energy into the podcast somehow. Now that wasn't the only issue with the Bill Burr podcast, but I'm not going to go into the other problems with that exact podcast in the interest of staying relevant to my topic, which is to explore problems that tend to run through the H3 podcast as a whole. And that brings me to my next point, that Ethan may be rising up the ranks too fast with the H3 podcast. Ethan and Hila's main channel, H3H3 Productions, has millions and millions of subscribers. Because their audience was so big already, that gave them an advantage for their podcast. They already had a built-in audience, basically. There's nothing wrong with this in and of itself, but think about this. Having this much attention and viewership directed towards something that you're not quite that experienced with yet isn't always good. While other podcasters are able to improve as they grow, the H3 podcast was subject to scrutiny from day one simply because of how well known they are. And this can certainly create a lot of pressure for Ethan, which can definitely overcomplicate things. Ethan has talked about his depression in the past and how he doesn't want to let down his viewers. And although the podcast may be generally easier to produce than a normal H3 video, there's certain aspects of it that also make it harder, especially if you deal with mental health issues like Ethan. One of the benefits of making a regular video for YouTube is that you can do it on your own time. You can redo lines as many times as you need, and you have more control over the audience's perception of you. You can also wait until you're in a better state of mind if that's the issue at hand. Those are all benefits that you don't get with live podcasting. Another downside to these podcasts is that Ethan often uses it as a platform for his long and often ridiculous rants. Now don't get me wrong, rants can be great and funny, but not really in the way that Ethan has been doing it. One example is when Ethan went on a 23-minute rant talking about the whole BetterHelp controversy. To sum it up, there was a controversy involving BetterHelp, which advertised itself as an online therapy service and was sponsoring many YouTubers. The problem with BetterHelp was that it was a total con job that was just out to exploit people with depression. The fine print even says that they can't guarantee you're even speaking to a licensed therapist. Overall, the whole thing was just deceptive and scummy, and PewDiePie made a video bringing all of this information to light. During the controversy, there were some people who suspected that there are some YouTubers who were just hamming it up and pretending to have depression in order to sell BetterHelp to their audience. And one of the YouTubers who was sponsored by BetterHelp was Ethan. So Ethan starts ranting about how he feels that people have become too toxic and cynical about YouTubers, and that people should view the choices they make through a more optimistic lens. Ethan actually makes some pretty good points in here, such as when he brought up that BetterHelp probably reached out to the YouTubers who were known to already have mental health issues, rather than the other way around, which is the theory that YouTubers were just pretending to have depression so that they could sell BetterHelp.
There's been this implication that people have exaggerated being depressed to sell BetterHelp. That is a very
That would be
cynical-
really shitty.
That would be very shitty. And the people that I've seen being called out are people that I know have had a history with mental health issues.
But what undermines his point here is Ethan's unwillingness to take responsibility.
In fact, when I did the sponsory 2 months ago, I didn't even endorse the product because I have never used the service.
But I ask you, the viewer, have you actually went back and watched the original ad read?
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode of the H3 Podcast. I need some BetterHelp. I am anxious right now. But this is one of these genius services. It's online counseling. They've got fully licensed counselors ready to consult with at any time. You get access to licensed, trained, fully accredited counselors and therapists. LGBTQ plus friendly. Basically, whoever you are, what religion you are, couples, anything, boom, they've got you covered with fully trained therapists to talk to you. But this is a beautiful thing about this service. You're online, you can have a video, you can have a chat, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever level with, they're there to help you out. A lot of people are not comfortable talking to therapists. So the best way to do it, to get in the door, is with BetterHelp.
While it is true that some people are being overly cynical, Ethan also should have taken responsibility for the fact that he promoted a total con job that targeted people with mental health issues. And he basically just doesn't take any responsibility for the whole BetterHelp situation.
So obviously, we as business owners and as entertainers are not going to read the terms of service of all of our partners. That's insane. Nobody has time for that. So we entrust our agency to verify the legitimacy of these companies. And I don't think they failed in this case. I mean, we think about it too. I don't just pass the buck completely to them.
Yeah.
I make a conscious decision to work with someone or not.
And it's not just the BetterHelp fiasco. Ethan often goes on these long, unfettered, and ridiculous rants.
But also, Jeff Bezos is worth nearly $1 trillion. So hire a couple more people. So that's what I mean about these psychopaths.
Yeah, he's the richest man in the world, right?
He's the richest man in the world. And hire more people so people can go to the bathroom. That doesn't even come close to affecting your bottom line. When you personally are worth $1 trillion fucking dollars.
Yeah. Jeff Bezos is worth a fucking 160 billion. A 2-second Google search would have told you that. But you know what? Honestly, you're only off by like $840 billion, so fuck it.
They get in China a month off. The whole fucking country takes a whole month off. Everything shuts down. You cannot work with these Chinese factories for an entire month. The whole country is on vacation. Meanwhile, in America, there's this. You always hear like, "Oh man, sweatshops in China, they're all getting worked out to their fucking teeth." Meanwhile, they've got a whole month off, and we're pissing in bottles to remain productive. It's this American attitude. It's a sickness. And China has better working conditions, you guys. America has the potential to actually be the greatest country that ever fucking existed, man. Title: Amazon warehouse workers allegedly pee in bottles to avoid punishment. While Amazon is known for revolutionary e-commerce with its quick delivery system for a variety of products, its workers allegedly sacrifice toilet time to meet the company's demands. Workers in the UK... Oh, this is in the UK, so what the fuck did I just talk about?
This particular article
Well-
is about a UK one.
The H3 HD production has always been about logical. We break it down and we think about it.
It's actually kind of staggering just how much misinformation Ethan spreads. And this isn't like a one-time thing. There are countless instances of Ethan being misinformed about something he's talking about. And if he just doesn't want to do the research, he can definitely afford to hire people to do it for him.
How can you talk about Pizzagate when the Catholic Church is literally a satanic cult and you're not all in on it? Not just covering it up.
Who is all in on it?
Everybody.
What do you mean?
Everybody. Imagine the Pope is raping children and you're talking about Pizzagate. What exactly does the Catholic Church do except rape kids?
That's some pretty dangerous generalizing and exaggerating going on in those clips. I feel like the way Ethan is talking about this very complex situation is really irresponsible.
What exactly does the Catholic Church do except rape kids?
I mean, you really have to chill out with that wording, man. These types of generalizations are not helping anybody. I just think that Ethan needs to be a lot more careful when he talks about this stuff. It seems like he's trying to cast a really wide net, but what he's really good at is less serious topics that are more related to pop culture. Just because he made good comedy videos doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be good at tackling these more serious issues. And Ethan is in a position where he has a really large audience watching and listening to him, so I really think that he should be more careful about what he says. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
And then we believe him. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, you're right.
I mean, he's doing this. I mean, what does that do?
Well, I think the guy knows what he's doing.
It seems like you're in love with your daughter.